Well, thank you so much for that. I'm a very huge fan of ABBA. I'm not sure really if I can match them in any ways, but I'll try to do my best. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to be here in Tallinn for the first Nordic Digital Agenda Day. And I want to say a special thank you to our Estonian colleagues for arranging this conference. It is an interesting day so far, and we are looking forward to the rest of the day. I will give you a short overview of the Swedish digital agenda and the work that we are doing when it comes to digitization. In October 2011, the government presented a new digital agenda for Sweden. When my minister, Mrs. Anna-Karin Hatt, joined office back in 2010, one of her first observations was that Sweden had a lot of sector-based strategies. We had one for broadband, we had another one for geographical data, we had a third one for e-health, and so on. She realized that in order to get the full potential out of ICT, we also needed a horizontal strategy. A year later, the new horizontal strategy was presented, the new digital agenda that was called ICT for Everyone. The digital agenda covered 22 areas, from digital inclusion to e-government, e-health, e-skills, infrastructure, freedom on the internet, and digital innovations. 143 various actions were presented, actions that now, almost 3 years later, have been fully implemented. In the agenda, a new target, a political goal was presented. It says that Sweden shall be the best in the world at exploiting the opportunities afforded by digitization. Already today, Sweden has a strong position together with your Nordic colleagues. And in many areas, we are very prosperous. And we rank in the top of many international rankings. For example, over 90% of the population is online. 40% of our 2-year-olds are online on a regular basis. But we also have some challenges. Around 1 million citizens are not a part of the digital society. On the other hand, we have 82% of the population, for example, that uses online banking. And last year, 63% of our population filled their tax returns electronically. But on the other hand, the public sector have problems meeting the demand of the citizens from a live event situation. And small businesses in Sweden uses internet to a lesser extent than our European colleagues. We also have a very good coverage of broadband. 57% of our households in Sweden have access to broadband with a speed of more than 100 megabits per second. But there are huge geographical differences. Only 11% has that access in rural areas. And as you know, Sweden is a large country and sparsely populated, so that is a challenge for us. So we are in a good position, but we have also a lot of challenges that we need to face. So it is important to work strategically and continuously so we don't lag behind. In the digital agenda, 3 strategic areas were identified that Sweden should focus on. The first one was digital inclusion. It means that all citizens should be able to use digital services and also have the skills to do so. Services should have a high degree of availability and usability. The second area for us to focus on are services. Services that create benefit for other users, and it should be easy and safe to use public services. And the services provided by the public sector, they must improve our welfare and contribute to our economic growth. The third area is broadband. There is a need for a robust and IT infrastructure, and it has to be both mobile and fixed, and with a high coverage all over the country, both in urban and rural areas. In order to implement the digital agenda, the government launched a Digitization Commission in 2012. The Commission's assignment is to implement and follow up the digital agenda, and they have a mandate until 2015. They have presented 2 reports so far. In the last report, they made suggestions to the government on how we can improve digitization within education, because that is an area where we are lagging behind. The Commission has also developed a database that consists of more than 100 key indicators within 22 different areas that shows the digital state of Sweden in 2013, and there also are some historical data back up until 10 years historically. The picture here shows the website, which is called Digital Sweden. And here you can see the different areas, and you can also find the key indicators. And this is a print screen of the website. And the Digital Sweden website was launched in March this year. To promote the digital agenda, Minister Hatt also launched a signatory concept. It means that businesses and organizations were invited to sign a letter of intent where they supported the digital agenda target and committed themselves to work for a higher degree of digitization within their own organizations. Today, more than 200 businesses and organizations from different sectors in the society have signed up, and their actions and contributions are followed up on a yearly basis by the Digitization Commission. Because this is a work, the digitization, the digital agenda, and the implementation of it, it has to be spread out through society. It's not only a task for the government. We also need the help of businesses, organizations, citizens, and other players. We also offered regional counties to become signatories. They were also offered to sign up on the digital agenda and commit themselves to develop a regional digital agenda. In January this year, the last regions signed up, so now 21 out of 21 regional counties are regional signatories, and 4 regions have so far presented their own digital agenda, and more regions are on the way. In the regional digital agendas, they set up tailor-made goals for digitization, and they also present strategies and concrete actions on how to reach them. And this is a very important part of implementing the digital agenda and digitization throughout the country. I'm going to give you an example. In March, Norrbotten adopted their digital agenda. And Norrbotten is located in the very north of Sweden. And it's a very sparsely populated area. There are 2 inhabitants per square kilometers. It's very comparable to Sahara. Not in the climate, but when it comes to the population. One of the aims for Norrbotten is to be the world-leading region for climate-efficient data center. And they have some unique selling points here up in Norrbotten. They have a very good climate. Since the average temperature during the year is very low, it could be used for cooling the service systems in a very efficient way. They also have a very robust and stable supply of electricity that has been designed for the industry up in the north, the paper mill industry and the iron industry. And they also have a very good broadband infrastructure. Today, Facebook has established a data center here, but Norrbotten wants more companies to come and establish them in the area. Now I will leave the word to Magnus, that will talk to you a little bit more about the e-government strategy that we have, and the challenges we are facing, and the work that are currently being done in Sweden.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Thank you, Estonia, for inviting us. One thing I've learned here is that Estonians think that Finns doesn't have humor. But when I presented the Swedish digital goal that we should be the best in the world, the Finnish response by their CIO was that, oh yes, you know, Magnus, we don't have such high ambitions. Our own ambition is to be better than Sweden. I thought that was funny. So I think you're wrong. I think the Finns do have humor. I think it also says something about the Nordic Digital Agenda days here, because we are here, I think, in the spirit of competition, in a healthy competition, because we all look at each other and say, what are they doing? What can we do better? And oh, no, darn, they're doing that, and shouldn't we be doing this? And this is a very fruitful ground for mutual learning. And I guess that's why we're here, and we should build on this. This should not be the last Nordic Digital Agenda Day. It's also important to say that we do things differently. I was reflecting on the Danish presentation here that Denmark and Sweden, we are sort of comparatively equal in most international rankings, but we do things vastly differently. Sweden could never say everybody should go digital by default. We try to build incentives instead. Denmark is very much more top-down. Sweden builds bottom-up. We have a vastly different relationship to the municipalities, so we have a lot more difficulties in building these kinds of services than you do. Sweden has large competent agencies that deliver services that are very difficult to control. Which way is the best way? I don't know. I will talk here a bit about the Swedish way. One of the keys of Swedish, I'd say, comparative success in becoming a mature e-gov nation is something that we did in the early 90s when we were in the financial crisis. We had inflation rate or an interest rate of 500% for about a couple of days, and Sweden was on the brink of becoming a rogue nation, basically. So there was a huge drive towards continuous savings. We put the productivity pressure on all our agencies, equaling the same rate of productivity increase that the service sector increases each year. And that we have been doing for now 25 years, I'd say. Of course, what happens is that e-government becomes the key for all agencies to survive. They continuously need to rationalize and build better services for lower cost. I think another reflection here in Estonia is something that unites, I think, Estonia, with all the Nordic countries, and I can now call you a Nordic brother, is a common fight against bureaucracy. None of us likes bureaucracy. We want to get rid of bureaucracy because it produces bad services to high cost. So all of us are here in a common fight, and we should learn from each other. I'll give you one example of what then the Swedish model has produced. I just got it from my colleague here. There are 14 central agencies that collect information from businesses. Each year there are 100 million information pieces that needs to go into the state. Out of these, 70 million are fully automated. There's no manual hands-on at all. The full automatic integration between the businesses and the public agencies. We still have 20 million digital forms that still needs to be taken care of, and about 10 million that still comes in paper form that we still want to get rid of. It also, I think, is a good way of saying that Sweden, as the rest of the Nordic countries and Estonia, is now a mature e-gov nation. The numbers you see on Sweden is that, as Christina said, over 60% of the population uses e-gov services. 140 agencies delivers over 3,000 services, 3,000 e-services. 70% of the agencies use social media regularly in their contacts with citizens and businesses. 65% uses software as cloud. 45% uses infrastructure as cloud. 40% works actively with open data, and about 30% has mobile apps of some kind. What we have also in Sweden, and the digital agenda brings that out in a nice way, active digitization policies in most policy areas. We went through it the other day, and we just found one area, one ministry that still wasn't playing the digital game. But there is a constant digitization move within the Swedish public administration, I'd say. So Sweden will continue to strive to become the best in the world in healthy competition with other mature e-gov nations. And as you see on this list, all the Nordic countries and Estonia usually fights among the top 10. We all have our own flavors. We all end up on top in different indexes. So Sweden, Denmark, Finland, Norway, Estonia usually ends up there. We all can learn from each other, and we should continue to share best practice. It's something that we are not very good at. We sort of look at each other, but we don't sit down in workshops and actually dig down in, let's say, what is the best e-box solution? What should the business models be in order to create the best user experience and the best business case? And I think if we did that more systematically, we do have a great potential here to take the lead in Europe. And we shouldn't forget that the global market for e-government services, given the amount of paper-based public administrations out there, is huge. Now, looking back at Sweden, we've done e-government basically since late 80s, I'd say. And one way of describing that trip is saying that we basically have 3 layers of e-government. The first one is the efficiency drive, to continuously find more efficient and productive solutions for agencies basically to survive the productivity pressure of the Ministry of Finance. And that started in the 1980s. And that is really taking care of the citizen as a taxpayer. The second layer started being built in the 90s when the internet arrived. Our agencies understood that we can deliver better services for lower cost by distributing it over the internet. And now with the advent of open data and the app community and app ecology, we've seen the advent of what we call a third generation of e-government, where the citizen is more seen as a co-owner or a co-creator of tomorrow's e-services. All this was put into the Swedish national strategy for e-government. It was named Putting the Citizen at the Center, and the government took 3 overriding goals and then 3 milestones in order to drive continuously the digitization of the public sector. A less complicated everyday life, an open government that supports innovation and participation, and higher quality and efficient operations. I'd say these are historical goals that we continuously work for, and I'll just walk through some of the milestones. The first objective, a less complicated everyday life for citizens. Yes, we see what Denmark do, but we're not doing the same thing. We're not saying to our citizens, you should go digital, but we rather say, digital when possible, but personal when needed. There is a strong political unwillingness to push citizens to become digital, in the sense that they don't want to create a digital backlash. I think there's an interesting tension here between what Sweden and Denmark are doing. I'm not sure that Sweden is doing the right thing. You might be doing the right thing, but over time we will learn. We do want to, but we haven't yet decided on a quantitative goal of 80% of the contact should be digital by 2020. It should not be obligatory, but then we can focus on creating incentives for citizens and businesses to go digital. The first milestone is to make sure that all digital services be designed according to user needs. What we see is that the e-services that the agencies produce is not used enough because people think they're too, they're not easy enough to work with. Today, there are over 1,500 services from machine-to-man interface. And what we want to do over the coming 6 years, up to 2020, we want to focus on life events, to take those services we have and the potentials we see and create more life event-based services. And we also think that that's the way of building a more personal entrance to the public sector. And we think this might be the entrance to the public sector within. That will be the natural channel. It will be complemented by other channels, but the mobile channel will probably be one of the main channels. So what we'll do is to point to 8 agencies. We have 4 today, and we will give them a strong mandate to go and ask the citizens and find the potentials and identify life events, and then make sure that they create tomorrow's e-services. You see here 4 of the areas that we're pointing to: building a house, starting and running a business, finding a job, and start studying. And we have a couple of other areas that we're looking into. What you see on the small picture here is the current app of the Social Security Agency that's automated basically for the citizens to make it a one-button thing to get temporary parental allowance if your kid and yourself go sick. And the idea is to have the service when and where it's needed in the most appropriate channel. Services should be simple and safe to use. We all know that's very easy to say. And we still need to focus on the user experience, but also make sure, as the Estonian president made clear this morning, that security is one of the key elements of keeping trust among the citizens towards the digital state, and so they want to participate. And what Sweden has been working for over the past 6 years is a new type of EID solution. which will be a federated solution, not a procured one, which hopefully then will drive competition among market actors to produce tomorrow's EID solution. We will also set up a national something, or it's actually already up and running, something we call an eGov lab. And that will be a physical environment where you actually have the developers and the agencies being able to meet the citizens and businesses in order to create the user experience needed to ensure sufficient take-up of the services that we produce. Now, something that Sweden doesn't have, and Denmark and UK and many other countries have, is that we don't have a national portal. We had a national portal sorry, until 2009, I think, where we tried to collect all the services and producing as a one-stop shop for the citizens. And then basically what we saw was that Google took people directly to the service because Swedish agencies had been on the net for a long while. Google worked for them, so the portal in itself didn't produce any user value, basically. So we closed it down. So what we have today is that you need to know what kind of agency that you need to go to find the appropriate e-service. Most of the time, that's not a problem because you Google it and you will get there anyway. What we see now today is that the mobile services or the apps has the same problem as the early e-services. So there's no simple means for citizens to find the appropriate app at the right time. So we want to, and we see it not as a big thing, but we want to create some kind of mobile portal, call it that, something that we call a My Sweden, built on top of an open services catalog, and then present that to the citizens. That might not sound like much, but I think it is, from a national point of view, important to market the e-services that you have. Because if we want the citizens to take the digital step or take the digital leap, we need to make sure that they're aware of the e-services, that they're there, and that they can have the best user experience. And we have no national focal point for that work today. And we want to create that. How that will look like, we don't know yet. We just see the need as of now. But we also think, and we see that regularly, that the public administration might not be the most innovative, might not be the most user-centric, or even understand the user needs as well as many other actors. So we want to keep that what we call the Gov store open for other people to create their instantiation, their door into the public sector. And that could be business, and that could be a civil society organization that creates their set of services and their service offering to the citizen. One of the national infrastructural components that we're rolling out, and here we hopefully will be doing more like Denmark in making it obligatory for the agencies to connect to the national infrastructure for the e-box. What we've put into place is a digital infrastructure shared by all the agencies that will allow secure message delivery from one agency to a citizen or to the business. But it's not just one inbox there. The infrastructure is open, so the point is that commercial suppliers of secure e-boxes can plug and play with that infrastructure. And by that way, we hope to build a market of secure e-boxes that will drive competition and innovation in order to build tomorrow's e-services. And that is today, we have a public inbox, and we have an app called My Public Mail that you can access with mobile EID. So wherever you are in the world, whenever you need the message from the public sector, you can get it. The second objective is not just user-centric. It's actually taking a stance in the sense that e-government is not only for government. It should contribute to the rest of the economy, to growth, to innovation, and also make sure that the state remains open and transparent. And the fourth milestone is to easier to find and use open data. And we've since 2011 we have the Swedish portal for open data, and it is focused on increasing access to published data. We're focusing on non-sensitive data and continues to drive publication of open data sets. We also seen some interesting developments, and you can see one here being Traffic Lab. It's an organization with a public agency at the center that meet up in order to make sure that the citizens meets the developers and the data in order to produce the services needed. And we've seen a huge amount of apps coming out of these types of initiatives. And here, the interesting thing is that the government as such don't know what services is being produced. So we need to let go, or let go of control and focus on the appropriate APIs to make sure that other people produces e-services, so that way we get more for less. I'd say since the early 90s, one driving factor for Swedish agencies is also to use other actors to do their job. One good example is the register for vehicles, which basically the agency itself never touches, but it's the car dealers that actually have a direct access to it. And when you sell or buy a car, it's the private actor that acts as a civil servant. And that's just a very efficient way of driving e-government. And we have the same thing in dental insurance, where the dentists do 99.5% of all the cases without any manual case management. Now, and I shouldn't go into this too much, but just to mention that out of these over 3,000 e-services that we have, over 2,000 of them already machine-to-machine services, providing fully automated information flows. But it's something interesting that shows up then, because it turns out that IT has turned into a critical infrastructure for the whole public administration, and now we have to make sure that all agencies play the same game. We can't allow a lowest level to become a risk for others, because the whole administration has started to become interdependent. And that's a new situation for the government in order to control that. That includes both information security, but also the IT maturity of the organization as such. If we want to focus on life events, and we need common enablers, that is for the Swedish government that usually has had a very light touch governance, as opposed to the Danish, for example, and the Finnish. It produces a new challenge for us. And it's something that we're working with right now to improve the overall governance of digitization in the public sector. Now, what we see is when we're going to enter this road for the next 5 years, the biggest challenges for us is how to create incentives for collaboration. Our productivity pressure puts incentives for each individual agency to do a good work, but how do we make them work together? How do we govern collaborative and shared projects and services? It's also something that is a specific skill that we don't find inside the agencies, but we need to reproduce between the agencies. We've seen at least one case where the agencies have sourced their services into one private actor, and that private actor went down, and then it turned out there was 10 agencies that sourced to the same, and that created systematic risk, which we don't have control of today. And one of the critical issues for us is to find the competences and keep it inside the public administration. I'll do one last slide and back up a bit to what I started with. And it's about fighting bureaucracy. And I think this is what we're all doing here. And I'll tell you a bit a story. When I was in Helsinki, I was sitting with the CIO from Bahrain and then the benchmarking officer from the UN. And Bahrain was very angry at UN because Bahrain was ranked low on benchmarking, especially on services on taxation. And the Bahrain's argument was basically, well, that's not fair. We don't have e-services because we don't do taxes. Now, that might be the ultimate goal of fighting bureaucracy. And to get to that level, putting this into a historical perspective, we might see before us the grand challenge of us today living in a bureaucratic state, which was a great progress from the pre-bureaucratic state with all the monarchies and the dukes and everything. And I think what we're looking at today, and we see as a common challenge among the Nordic countries, and I think we might be the first in the world to go into what we might call a post-bureaucratic state. And then we need to ask ourselves, how can we build that? Thank you. And now you'll get a crazy idea.
And I'm not going to go crazy. I'm going to talk about a simple thing and about honoring old agreements. In 1638, the Swedish state set up a postal route going from Stockholm over Åland to Turku to Helsinki and to Narva. It's quite a long time ago. And in 1735, Denmark and Sweden finally agreed on a postal agreement and not having a postal fight, where Sweden had to hide their postal things going through Denmark. So what I want to ask you today is...
Sorry, jump in. Can you speak to the mics at the podium?
Of course. So what I would like to propose is that we actually honor these old agreements, is setting up all these e-boxes, digital letters and whatever. Shouldn't we revisit those agreements, pick them up again, and actually make sure that our e-boxes work together? I know that some of you have talked about it, but let's do it and not have a sort of a postal fight with Denmark again. And even if Denmark wants to go digitized by default, please don't shut down the postal roads going to Denmark. It's 140 years ago that the postal union was set up. Using a word I can't say in English, the reciprocal right of taking care of each other's letters. We strive to eliminate borders for invoices, etc., but let's do it also for the basics. And set up a common mailbox infrastructure open to competition and innovation. It's secure, trusted, so we can send each other's citizens the basic government mail. That's our proposal.
Big applause for Sweden. And can we get you up on the stage? So I think what Sweden has done, not just only invaded, but trying to take over the world as well, which is good, A bit of competition is useful. And you also brought in along, let's say, very sort of good perspectives on, you know, that whatever we try to do in the future, we have to keep in mind where we're coming from, first of all. But at the same time, you know, when we talk about all the services, we can't forget broadband and governance and all the other issues. So it's a package of things that we have to take care of. We will have time for a few questions. So again, I want to see hands. Does anybody has a question right away? Anybody?
No one.
Yes. Can we get the mic there? And one more to the front.
Good morning. My name is Guus Bronkers. I work in the government of the Netherlands. Thank you for your presentation. It was very clear and helpful. I was wondering if you do have any policy on standardization on the technical field, the process field, the services field in Sweden.
On the government level, no. So far, we've delegated that to the agencies. We have a couple of decisions. We just set up what we call an IT Standardization Council, which is supposed to be an organization where the agencies can order a standardization process to begin, so that the actors in that group can produce the standard, and then that could be lifted to the government in order to be regulated upon. But so far we have very little of this, as opposed to Denmark and Netherlands, as far as I know.
Okay.
So doesn't that give a problem when you're building the e-government to the next level?
It will. Now, what the e-delegation, which is 16 director generals that gather up in order to find the potential and produce new service and produce new services, they said that we should not take a top-down standardization approach, but rather an iterative and more agile, step-by-step standardization process that when we produce a service, we look at that standard and see whether we can implement that. So we see it as a bottom-up approach. Now, whether that's feasible as opposed to the more top-down approaches, we don't know yet. But that's how Sweden works.
Thank you.
Mr. Eagle. Mic to the front, please.
Thank you. A question to Sweden. How you see the European Union? I mean, like, the countries are having like different, they're like e-governments in different European countries are in different level. And if European Union wants to do something common, some of the countries, this is a big step forward, but for some of the countries, it's they just have to downgrade themselves in some cases. So how you see that European Union initiatives at the moment? Like, is European Union a partner or not?
I'd say that the Swedish policy is to be active in the early stages of the proposals, and then try to influence and make sure that what comes out is good enough, to be diplomatic. But then I'd say I am a true believer of European collaboration. But I'm also a true believer of that some might go faster than others at certain times in history, given that they share what they do.
Okay. Any other questions? Until you guys think, I'll ask one from both of you. So first to you, Christina, that well, you talked about, let's say, how the regions now have bought into the program of digital agenda and the companies and so forth. I mean, was it easy to come about? Was it easy to reach that it would be, let's say, a national really commitment?
I think it was quite difficult in the beginning. Some of the organization and businesses, I think it was around 50 that signed up directly when the digital agenda was presented. So it was kind of a good coverage from the beginning, and more companies has been adding on, and they want to join. I think they are, when the strategy, the digital agenda was presented, it was very well received, and it also filled a gap that many of both the regions and the businesses had. When it comes to regions, I think there has been a development during the last couple of years where we see the regions on a political level are talking more about digitization than they did before. In the early stage, it was more about broadband and IT infrastructure, but now they have developed and talking more about services and also about digital inclusion. And there has been a road to get the regions to sign up for the digital agenda, but today we have all regions on board, which we are very happy about.
Sounds good, sounds good. And I mean, to you, my question would be this, that sort of the slogan that you put forward, that, you know, it doesn't have, the service does not necessarily have to be digital, but personal when needed. So to me, it actually strikes that even the latter part actually involves doing a lot of things digitally, perhaps just not in direct sort of interaction with the citizen, or. So it's a challenge still, let's say, to even sort of, you know, do the personal part really with the help of technology, right?
Well, we see and there's an interesting challenge in here that what I guess the citizens want is that they want as little contact and e-services as possible because they want to have it automated if it doesn't breach the integrity of their person, of course. But as someone said that, yes, that's probably a good goal, but it might also be dangerous because at some point we lose touch with what the government do for us. I heard the Norwegians saying that some people have problems understanding or even grasping that they are paying taxes because it's so fully automated in the back end. In Sweden, you push a button, and then what does that mean? And it's still very much part of you being a citizen to understand why you pay tax, how much, and where it goes to. So we should take care not to hide too much of what's going on. So while doing it better back office, we also need to increase the transparency of what's happening.
Very good point. Do we have the very last question from anybody? If not, I thank you both and you as well. Thank you.
Thank you.